as the United States gets ready to slash its aid budget, as European politicians clamor against the threat of uncontrolled migration. Elsewhere, famine is brewing, and it's man-made. Up to 20 million face starvation in Yemen, Somalia, South Sudan, and northeast Nigeria. Now, each case is different, but they have this in common: conflict, the breakdown of public services, and in the case of South Sudan, a leaked UN report squarely accuses the government of withholding food to opposition-dominated areas. Donor drives alone won't solve the mess in Africa's newest nation, an oil-rich country whose creation was encouraged by the West. Now, we can argue about who bears the responsibility. No excuse, and we heard some blunt words last week from the new UN Secretary General, bluntly accusing South Sudan's president of obstructing peace and reconciliation.
President Kiir's statements regarding his intention to hold a national dialogue are welcome. They are not convincing in the context of ongoing hostilities, the absence of consultation with key stakeholders, the systematic curtailment of basic political freedoms and restrictions on humanitarian access, and the growing fragmentation of both sides of the conflict.
What's your reaction to that, Acheikh IBN-OUMAR, hearing the new UN Secretary General saying that, well, the words of South Sudan's president are not convincing?
Well, it is quite new because, in the United Nations and the African Union, there is this diplomatic language that lead the people in charge to, be some kind of soft on the sitting head of state. I think I don't know what is going on the ground, but I think it is a good move, to call a spade when people lives and survival is at stake. I think it is a good move. But talking of South Sudan, I think the term government is a misnomer, because when you look at the forces fighting with each other, there is no difference between the so-called governmental forces and the rebels, because the same kind of militia, the same kind of ethnic motivations, the same kind of behavior toward the civilian and so on. It is difficult, to draw a separate line between the governmental forces and the rebel ones. So the picture is very confused, and it needs a very strong leadership on all the sides, to move forward.
Let me ask you this question, Acheikh. The independence of South Sudan, 2011, at the time there were big celebrations. Was it a half-baked idea, giving South Sudan its independence?
No, I think that the tragic event in the whole recent history of South Sudan is the death of the leader, late John Garang, that came at a very wrong time. And this leadership vacuum, is in my view, is the main explication behind all the trouble we have seen, because both Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, when Dr. John Garang was alive, there used to be on the margin of the movement, and you may remember that Salva Kiir was put in jail by John Garang for misbehavior, and Riek Machar at some time split away and joined the central government in Khartoum. So my explication is that the vacuum left by the death of John Garang, and there were no national leadership able to fill this vacuum, is the triggering factor for all this situation. But you may add to that the calculation on the part of the neighboring countries, Kenya, Uganda, and the central government in Sudan, to say anything of Ethiopia, and even faraway players like Israel and Arab countries and the United States. So
a lot of it's internal, and some of it is outside players.
Yeah, of course. And the African Union, has been totally absent through the whole thing. They were never, and at the level of the African Union, there were no strong move, toward solving the situation, or at least contributing to the solution.
All right. Acheikh IBN-OUMAR, of course, the United States is not the only country on the planet. People in the U.S. might say, well, why don't others just pay more?
Well, allow me to go a little back to the climate thing. When I was a student, we learned that in what is called the Ancien Régime in France, the monarchical regime, there used to be a food shortage every 5 years and a full-blown famine every 18 years. So the climate in France and Europe has not changed, or not much. So it is clear that the climate factor is, it is real, but the problem of organization.
But on this issue now of not enough relief aid getting in, and you just heard Simona Fulton talk about it. Whose job is it to make sure there's enough money? Criticism going into the Trump administration for cutting its budget, but is it really just up to the United States to pay for the food aid?
I think that the case put forward by Professor Deval about Ethiopia, it is a very instructive one, because it all boils down to the capacity of organization on the part of the local government. Contributing materially, it is important, but organizing the whole system of, putting the case to the international arena and getting the food and organizing the transportation and, up to the grassroots level, it is very important. Or what we have in all these countries, even in the countries where there is no, violent conflicts, there is bad governance, what is called bad governance, and there is no internal capacity for addressing any situation of that kind. So I think that it is very important for the local government and for local association to begin with, making effort to improve the organization at the local level, and starting by contributing to solving the problem on themselves before, asking for external help.
Just very briefly.